Wondering how much IVF actually costs? Today, we're going to cover the cost of IVF in a high cost of living state versus a low cost of living state, as well as extra tests and medications that may alter your final IVF bill. My name is Jess. I'm a certified nurse midwife and infertility mom, and I'm preparing for my second embryo transfer in Arizona. I actually live in Washington State and I started my infertility care in Washington State. But as a healthcare provider, I've cared for several women who have gone to Arizona for IVF. And so I knew when our reproductive endocrinologist suggested that it was time that we moved to IVF, it would be less expensive to pursue it in a different state. We did do all of the IVF counseling with our clinic in Washington State. And the quote that they gave us at the end of 2022 for IVF with pre-implantation genetic testing was between $27,000 to $32,000, depending on the cost of medication. That being said, I actually had a friend who did IVF at the same clinic, and she told me by the time everything was said and done, it actually cost her closer to $35,000 to do IVF in Washington. The biggest expense when you're considering IVF is the egg retrieval, just because you're booking operating room time as well as covering costs of anesthesia. And the quote we got for doing egg retrieval in Washington State was $18,500, all due in advance. So since several of my patients had gone to a specific clinic in Arizona and had gone on to have successful pregnancies, that was the first place I inquired. And the quote they gave me for all expenses, egg retrieval, medications, everything, was closer to $23,000. And it was more than I was anticipating. I thought it was going to be even less than that in Arizona State. But the biggest cost difference was the cost of egg retrieval. In Arizona, the cost of egg retrieval was $8,000. So that alone is just a $10,000 difference compared to doing egg retrieval in Washington State. Our first embryo transfer with the clinic in Arizona was $2,000. And the quote I had gotten for embryo transfer in Washington was $4,500. That being said, though, they have raised their prices, and now for our second embryo transfer, we're going to pay $3,700. But there's been so much inflation, I suspect that the Washington clinic has probably raised their rates as well. Embryo storage in Washington was also a little bit more expensive at $840 per year compared to $500 a year in Arizona. Pre-implantation genetic testing costs were virtually the same in each state at about $4,000. And that is something that is optional. You don't have to do pre-implantation genetic testing when you're pursuing IVF. But personally, I can't imagine doing it without the genetic testing. For us, that was part of the reason why we wanted to pursue IVF. We wanted to know that we were transferring genetically normal embryos, but you could, in theory, totally eliminate that cost if you wanted to. So here's the full cost breakdown of what IVF has cost us in Arizona, and I have rounded some of the numbers just to make it easier. So the initial consultation was $150. The medications to prep for egg retrieval were $5,100. Anesthesia for egg retrieval was $600. Egg retrieval was $8,000. The pre-implantation genetic testing after they made our embryos was $4,000. Embryo storage is $500. Additional medications for embryo transfer was about $750. Embryo transfer itself with the new updated cost was $3,700, bringing us to a grand total of $22,800. And I'm pretty happy with this number since the quote we got was $23,000. If we included, the cost for the first embryo transfer as opposed to the new updated cost, the cost would be even lower at about $20,600. And since that's pretty close to the cost of just egg retrieval in Washington, I think it was worth the hassle of traveling out of state and having to buy a few plane tickets. We were able to book most of our plane tickets on points. The ones that we weren't were still not expensive just because it's not that expensive to fly from Phoenix to Seattle. And we also have family that we can stay with in Phoenix, so we didn't have hotel costs, rental car costs, those sorts of things. So even with having to take multiple trips back to Phoenix, I still think we've saved thousands of dollars by pursuing IVF out of state. There are going to be some ongoing costs once you become pregnant. For example, you'll continue your progesterone and oil injections until 10 weeks of pregnancy, and those are about $120 for a 2-week supply. For this embryo transfer, I'm also doing Lovenox injections, and I will continue those until 14 weeks of pregnancy, and they're about $120 for a 5-week supply. I hope you found this video helpful. If you have any questions about the cost of IVF that I didn't answer, please leave them in the comments. I will answer them. If you're wondering what to expect at embryo transfer, I made a video about that and I will link that next. I post new videos every week about infertility, pregnancy loss, and soon, hopefully, pregnancy after 35. So please like, subscribe, turn on the notification bell so you don't miss an upload. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for watching.